Ukraine's leadership is important and the United Kingdom stands firmly behind it.
Can I reiterate the opposition's support for the government's position here? We've said from day one that a peace negotiations is a matter for the Ukrainians to determine. The best leverage that the Ukrainians can have in those negotiations is to have our fullest support and arms to do that. So I hope we will continue. Ursula von der Leyen said yesterday, urged the EU to use profits from assets frozen, Russian assets frozen, to help arm the Ukrainians. Will the Noble Lord the Minister reassure us that we are doing everything possible with our EU neighbours to do that, to make sure that the Russians do pay for this outrageous war?
My Lords, I acknowledge and thank the Noble Lord, and we are very clear indeed. When we talk as one country, one nation in our united stand against this Russia's illegal war. On the point he raises about the profits, in this regard, myself, and I was delighted Baroness Swinburne was able to join me for a meeting. We've had some constructive talks about the position with the UK and what's happening in the EU, and we are engaging directly with the EU colleagues on this. We need to ensure that any act we take, and I know the Noble Lord supports that, is legally robust.
My Lord.
My Lord. Following a bleak winter of stalemate, we arrive at a grim second anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. With Putin's imminent re-election and troops mobilised, we must be prepared for things to get worse and to step up if we need be. Does the Minister agree that standing by our NATO commitments of 2% is an important part of this? And would he urge others in NATO, including those who seek to lead, to do so?
I agree with my noble friend, and we're proud to do so. And let me assure my noble friend, she asked me only last week about the position of Hungary when it came to the accession of Sweden, and I'm sure we were all delighted to see progress. And I assure her that what we said at Dispatch Box, we follow through with a promise. When I met the Foreign Minister of Hungary, the first thing he said to me is, Tariq, you mentioned me in Parliament the other day. And I said, yes, and I now need an answer, and we got it.
My Lords, I wonder if the Minister has seen the, may I say I don't agree with my colleague behind me in his view, but has the Minister seen the recent newspaper report of a Ukrainian officer lamenting the fact that I have the Russian soldiers in my sights, but no shells to fire at them? My Lords, does not that summarise the perilous position of the Ukrainian forces? But does it also not underline the urgency of all nations in Western Europe, including Britain, giving additional aid now to the government of Ukraine?
I agree with my noble friend, and that is why on Saturday my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, announced that the UK will spend further £245 million throughout the next year to procure and invigorate supply chains to produce urgently needed artillery ammunition for Ukraine.
Lords, from these benches, I would like to associate my support to the remarks of Lord Collins in terms of the support that these benches give to the government's position on Ukraine. What I would ask, though, is, given that we are in this for the long haul, Ukraine appears to be in this for the long haul, and we are going to need to spend a lot of money on defence and diplomacy to get this right and ensure that not only Ukraine but the Baltic states are secure. What is the government doing to ensure that the citizens of the United Kingdom are wholly behind this as well? Because we don't want people to start thinking that somehow support isn't here in this country. We want the Noble Lord Skidelsky, I will regret to say, we want him to be proved wrong.
My Lords, of course, what is very clear, the Noble Lady mentioned both defence and diplomacy. I've already referred to the additional funding on munitions. I also underline the fact that every diplomatic engagement that we are undertaking is giving that reassurance directly to the Ukrainians. Last week I was in India. I made sure the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine was there. I met with her. My noble friend, the Foreign Secretary, has been extensively engaged. He attended the UN Security Council meeting marking the second anniversary of Russia's illegal invasion in New York and address the UN Security Council. Only yesterday I returned from Geneva, where a key part of my address to the UN Human Rights Council was on Ukraine, and I also met with their ambassador, together with all our colleagues from the UK mission. I think it is very clear, both this Parliament, indeed the diplomatic service, departments, government, and indeed our people stand with Ukraine, and we are very proud of the 140,000 odd Ukrainians who have now made Britain their temporary home, and I use that word quite definitively because they themselves want and yearn for a return back home to Ukraine.
My noble friend Lord Fowler is quite right that it needs the full support of Europe, but it's not just Europe. The trouble is that half Asia, indeed half the world, are either neutral or actively supporting Russia through their economy and through weaponry. So can he tell us what new initiatives are really required beyond general United Nations support to mobilise, for instance, all the nations of the Commonwealth, for instance, reapproaching, at least on this issue, some aspects of China and the other Asian powers, then, only then, when Putin feels he is a real pariah and the whole world is against him, will you get the change you want?
My Lords, I recall a question previously as well, and indeed the noble and gallant Lord Stirrup engaged on it. When we look firstly to our European partners quite directly, the ability for them to step up and do more in this respect, I think, is equally important, and we need that to happen. Of course, we will continue to work with the United States on this important priority, but my noble friend is also quite right to say that we need to ensure there's a diplomatic effort afoot as well. And I think we have been succeeding. When you look at those countries who voted with Russia, you can count them on a single hand, and that's been consistent over an 18-month period, and that shows the strength of British diplomacy together with our partners, that Russia is increasingly feeling isolated, $400 billion worth denied to them because of the sanctions. Of course we've got to look at circumvention, of course we've got to look at loopholes, but I assure my noble friend our diplomacy continues in earnest.
I hope the Minister is reassured by the support on all sides of the House, and he's got a clear message that appeasement never works. Can I ask him, when he looks forward to the long term, what representations have been made to the Treasury on the future of the defence budget?
My Lords, I first of all appreciate what the noble Lord has said, and I think it's been not just clear to me, it's been clear to Ukraine about the strong support they've had from the United Kingdom across the piece, from Parliament, from people. On the point of budget, of course, we're very much seized of it. As I indicated in my original answer, this is a priority not just for the Foreign Office, this is a priority for the UK government. And of course, we work with colleagues, including those with Treasury, to ensure that we can back the priority that we have made, that we stand with Ukraine today, tomorrow, and until this war ends.
Second oral question, Lord Hayne.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
Sorry, my Lords, there's too much in the file today, so... My Lords, we support a two-state solution, as I said only the other day, that guarantees security and stability for both Israelis and Palestinians. Our position has not changed. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, was clear in his recent call with Prime Minister Netanyahu that a viable two-state solution is the best means to achieve lasting peace. With our allies, we must provide the practical and enduring support to bolster the Palestinian Authority, and the PA itself must also take much-needed steps on reform. Israel, importantly, must act too, releasing frozen funds, halting settlement expansion, and holding those responsible for settler violence accountable.
My Lords, but although many of us have joined the government in long backing a two-state solution, how realistic is this now when Prime Minister Netanyahu has firmly ruled it out? Gaza has been reduced to rubble, and Israel is expanding its illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, to over 750,000 settlers. What alternative is Israel offering, if not permanent siege and oppressed status for the Palestinians? Shouldn't we be considering other options, perhaps a negotiated confederal state with security and self-determination for both Israelis and Palestinians?
My Lords, I hear what the noble Lord has said, and it's not the first time I'm hearing suggestions for an alternative. I think what is very clear, that with the current situation and the crisis that is gripping the Middle East, from the abhorrent events of the 7th of October to the tragedy of the ongoing conflict itself, and of course the rights and rightful rights of the Palestinians, that we now seize the moment. This is perhaps in my career as a Foreign Office Minister the first time we've seen not just one country or two or mere standing up at the dispatch box. There is real live diplomacy, there is real live activity, and again, it's not just between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the Americans, ourselves and the Europeans. The region itself is seized by this moment, that through the tragedy of every life lost in Israel, of every life lost in Gaza, and every life lost in West Bank, every Israeli, every Palestinian life lost, the strongest legacy we can provide is finally provide a viable vision and provide that two-state solution.
My Lord, well,
the West Bank is not in law.
My Lords, between 2015 and 2019, the United Kingdom ran a very worthy Middle East peace process programme. It was led by the Foreign Office, supported by the MOD and the then Department of DFID. May I ask my noble friend, the Minister, if there are any plans to revive elements of that programme, and would he be prepared to meet with me to discuss this further?
Well, on the second question from my noble friend, I'm always delighted to meet with my noble friend and share and gain from her insights. And of course, we are aware of the different programs. Currently, we are working with key partners on the whole issue of the 5 points that my noble friend, the Foreign Secretary, has outlined. But I'll be pleased to meet with her to see how, as these plans develop, component parts of what we already have can also be very much part and parcel of those discussions.
Noble Lord the Minister gave a very positive response to the Noble Lord Lord Hayne, seeming to think that this is a turning point in Israeli-Palestinian relations. But could he explain to the House how he thinks we're going to get to the point of a two-state solution, given the situation as outlined by Lord Hayne?
My Lord's, first thing I'd say to the noble lady, you have to be positive. If you're not positive in diplomacy, we might as well pack up our bags and stay at home. And that's certainly not something myself or the Foreign Secretary are doing. Why are we engaging? Because this is about that moment, through this tragedy. And yes, there are challenges on both the Israeli and the Palestinian side, and I've alluded to them already. What is very clear is that this is a moment in time. There is a window. We can shift the dial, and that's where our focus should be.
My Lords, Israel's rejection of a two-state solution comes as no surprise. The Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is on record for saying Palestinians should be treated like their historical enemies, the Amaleks, and killed, every man, woman, child and infant in the cradle. The Justice Minister says Palestinians are like animals and should be treated as such. Would the noble Lord the Minister agree that we should not allow the cruel, genocidal behaviour of the regime in Israel fan anti-Semitic attitudes to hard-working and peaceful Jews in this country?
My Lords, I don't agree with the noble Lord, and I will tell him why, because I know Israel well. It's a country I've visited. There are many in Israel who recognise the importance, and whether they're religiously driven from the teachings of the Torah, which I have also myself studied. Indeed, what is important is faith provides a solution here as well to ensure that those with conviction of faith can actually provide the opportunity to come together, that we respect each other. This is one family. It's an Abrahamic family. Jerusalem is the center to three great faiths. Now is the time for not hate to come forward, but real recognition of not just tolerance, but respect, and that's where our focus is. I speak for the British government, not the Israeli one.
Noble Lord, Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, said that we needed to give hope to the Palestinians, and one of the ways is not to wait for the end of the process to recognise Palestine, but actually ensure that their voice is heard in those negotiations to seek the solution that my noble friend was talking about. Actually, a commitment to a two-state solution, ensuring that both sides are properly represented, is the key to solving this nightmare we're in at the moment.
I welcome the points that the noble Lord has made, and I also recognise the statement from His Majesty's official opposition about the importance of the two-state solution. I'm not saying it's not challenging. Of course it is. It's perhaps arguably more challenging than not. But what is different, and I say this quite personally, having looked at this, but also politically, that everyone is now engaged on this agenda. It is a priority not for one country or two, but for everyone. And we recognise, Israelis recognise, stability and security for Israelis means stability and security for Palestinians. It does mean leadership. It means leadership amongst Israel and amongst the Palestinians. That's what we're focused on. On the recognition point, my noble friend has outlined what is a clear pathway to ensure that there is a political horizon provided for the Palestinians, which, as the noble lord rightly said, is that we can never, ever give up on hope.
My Lords, the West Bank is not in law part of Israel. Yet Israel has for many years...
Santos.
My Lords...
Bishop, Bishop.
Oh, my Lords. My Lords.
Order. Sit down. Let the Bishop. Oh, come on.
But started my question.
Where's the whip? Santos. Bishop.
My Lords, to solve an argument, perhaps I will proceed with my question with thanks. Last year, my Lords, it was reported that the government of Israel is considering plans to build a national park on the Mount of Olives. Could the noble Lord the Minister say what assessment has been made of the impact of these proposals for the Christian holy sites in this area and indeed the holy sites of other faith communities, and the impact that such a project would have on the prospect of Jerusalem as a shared capital for Israeli and Palestinian states?
Well, perhaps the Right Reverend Prelate has illustrated my point. We need, faith does provide a solution, and as we've just seen in practical terms. But in all seriousness, yes, I am aware of those plans, and the position is very clear. Settlements are illegal, irrespective of whether they're in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, or elsewhere in the occupied territories. The United Kingdom's position is very clear on this. What is needed, though, is a real sense to prevail, which is an important opportunity to seize. That Jerusalem itself presents a real beacon for three important faiths. We need to recognize rights of access, the rights and reverence attached to that. But equally central to that is ensuring security, stability for Israelis, for Palestinians, for Arabs, for Jews, for Christians, for Muslims, for Jews. That is the way we will find a solution, and I would say that, inshallah, that's what I'm focused on.
I agree.
My Lords.
Last remarks. Can I also point him to the letter in the Financial Times today, which explains that a two-state solution was imposed on Sudan, and there is now the most vicious civil war there. Will the Foreign Office, in calling for a two-state solution, now start talking to interested parties about the nature of it? Specifically, will it be a democracy? Will there be a military? Will there be access to ensure there's no tunnels? All these issues must be first addressed before calling for a two-state solution.
Excellent.
My noble friend charts a particular item, and that's in terms of process, and that's why my noble friend the Foreign Secretary has been clear. First and foremost, we must stop the current fighting. That will allow aid to go in, hostages to be released. But where I disagree with my noble friend, the two-state solution is the viable option. The rights of people need to be protected. The rights of Palestinians need to be recognized. This is enshrined in international law through UN Security Councils, which, of course, created the State of Israel. It's important we work with all partners, including Israel and the Palestinians directly. And yes, democracy is a fundamental objective to ensure the rights of all citizens, Israelis and Palestinians, are strengthened and protected.
Third oral question, Lord Faulkner of Worcester.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing on my name.